That was the most delayed head-on I've ever seen in my entire life. Yes, yes, you have my attention. Take it in the throat. An opinion that I've been seeing pop up a lot recently within the Dead by Daylight community is we don't need this license because this license hasn't made it into the game. And normally this is in reference to something that is like horror adjacent or something that is not fully classical horror. And it will be said that we can't have that because we don't have another actual classic horror type of dealio in the game. And interestingly, I have never in my entire time of seeing people bring this up ever seen someone mention the Leprechaun. If you don't know, because you're blessed, unlike me, the Leprechaun is a set of horror movies that came out in the late 90s to early 2000s, and they are about what you would expect. A leprechaun that kills people. It's an absurdly hilarious series in the same vein as like Freddy Krueger or Scream, right? It's a comedy horror franchise. It's completely and utterly ridiculous to the point that I'm honestly confused as to how people haven't brought it up. And for a long time, I didn't think we could ever have the Leprechaun in Dead by Daylight for the same reason that I ignorantly made a video 3 months before Chucky's release that we could never have Chucky in Dead by Daylight because he's simply too small. What could you possibly do with the character? And the more that I was thinking about whether or not I wanted to have this discussion, the more that I was kind of hesitant to do so. And the reason for that is because I didn't want to just retread the same ground as the last few should this character come to Dead by Daylight videos that I've done, where it was not a question of does this character belong in Dead by Daylight so much for me as will this character be able to be done justice thematic wise? What will the power be? What can we do with the abilities? What are the add-ons going to be? Can this character fit into the game not as a horror icon but as a gameplay aspect? And unfortunately, that's kind of the question we have here, because if we were simply opening up a big scrapbook of horror icons and saying, does this character belong here? The Leprechaun would be a gigantic, huge yes, especially because we have Chucky. We already have a tiny little horror comedy brutal dude. Sure, let's get another one. But what do we do with the Leprechaun? One of the Leprechaun's biggest things is the fact that you can't really get away from him because he scurries through small places, because of course he does. But we already had the scamper mechanic with Chucky, and that mechanic was so overpowered that it had to be nerfed over and over and over again, to the point where now it's got an incredibly high skill floor to even remotely be used correctly. I think one of the biggest problems when it comes to introducing these tiny killers is not how do you make the tiny killer work in terms of the survivors and stuff, because they did very well with Chucky. It's how do you make the tiny killer work that is not the same as this previous tiny killer. Now, I know for a lot of people, myself included, there was a little bit of a disappointment that Chucky was not a full-on stealth killer. The idea that he could use like the good guy dolls to like feign where he was at any time seemed like a really cool idea, and I was really kind of put off that we didn't get that we just kind of got another dash killer. But I will admit that looking back on the Chucky films, it kind of makes a lot of sense that the slice and dice mechanic, because Chucky is a relentless little shit. He's going to keep coming after you until he gets his kill. He's a very single target, relentless little shit. And so I think that the slice and dice works a lot better than I originally had a reaction to. But what do you do with the Leprechaun? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different stuff that we could think about, like interacting with pots of gold, or, you know, rainbows, or maybe that weird-ass tricycle scene from the first movie, and Jennifer Aniston as a survivor would be interesting, I think. But I feel like in terms of like his power level, like, or not power level, but in terms of his power and his abilities, what can we give him that Chucky hasn't already gotten? How do we stop this from being a Chucky 2.0? And that's the really defining factor in whether or not we should bring the Leprechaun into Dead by Daylight. So the longer that I sat there and I thought about it, the more I realized that I don't think it's actually possible to bring the Leprechaun in without just making him Chucky 2.0, because people are going to wonder, where is his scamper ability, right? Where is his ability to crawl underneath pallets? We already had that. It didn't work and it sucked. The only thing that I can think of is that you would give him maybe like a stun whenever he uses a scamper to give the survivors a little bit more distance, but then it just becomes a glorified pallet breaking ability, and I don't like that idea. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to have another way to deal with the 50 million pallets in this game, but I don't like the idea of punishing the killer for breaking a pallet. So I kept thinking to myself over and over again, okay, well, we can have the gold coins, the pot of gold, you know, so maybe survivors steal the gold coins and it gives them some sort of an advantage against the Leprechaun, but it also feeds the Leprechaun, right? So like when they pick up a gold coin, their aura or killer instinct or something gets revealed, but then in exchange, maybe the survivor gets a little bit of haste, or they get, you know, something to help them in chase, or whatever the case may be, to give maybe this kind of push-pull mechanic, right? The survivor interacts with the coin, you have to go and get the coins. Then I took that a step further, and I remember this really old, odd concept for the Slender Man where generators were replaced with papers on the Slender Man concept. And I remember not liking that idea, but then I thought about it and I was like, that might be kind of cool, right? What if instead of generators, survivors have to gather gold coins in order to escape the trial? You have to make it out of the trial with the riches from the Leprechaun. But then I remembered why I hated that idea in the first place, and it's because it would make like so many perks completely worthless, right? Like imagine you're a survivor, you bring like a toolbox and gen perks, and then there's no generators, like at all. Like it just doesn't exist. And I know some people would be like, oh, it's the same thing with plague. If you bring plague and you have med kits and stuff like that, then the survivors just can't use their builds. But I mean, plagues can still M1 you without puking on you from time to time, right? Like there's still an opportunity to be healed from time to time, but the idea of removing generators completely just simply will never work. So I kept running through these ideas. I wrote them down. I had a huge Google Doc, and I would write an idea down, and then I think about it, and then I cross it off. And I'd write an idea down, I think about it, and then I cross it off. And unfortunately, I just don't know if we could ever have the Leprechaun as their own unique killer. But, and this is a huge but, and I don't know if it is even remotely possible because of the way licensing works, the Leprechaun would be a phenomenal visceral skin for Chucky. Instead of the knife with the slice and dice, he would just have his claws out, right? And instead of like the Mori that we currently have with all like the different tools, it could be the pogo stick scene, because that's just completely and utterly ridiculous. And he would have his own unique voice lines. I think the actor is still alive, so we could have the actor reprise. That would be really cool. Will it ever happen? Probably not. Licensing is really finicky that way, but holy shit, it would be the coolest visceral skin in the entire game if we ever got that. So yeah, I don't think the Leprechaun could work gameplay wise. Maybe I'll end up eating my words like this time next year, like I did whenever I released the Chucky video all those years ago. But I just don't see it. I just don't see how we could do it without just having Chucky 2.0, and that really frustrates me, but I've been surprised before, so let me know what you think down in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and as always, a great big special thank you to my channel members listed on screen now. You want to find out how to become a channel member today, get awesome perks like seeing videos early, merch discount codes, and more, then please click that join button down below. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one.